Well, thank you, Bridget. I'm Margaret Ortman. I am one of the part-time online students in the MBA program. I currently work at the U, and I am the program coordinator and an associate professor, one of the two, I can't keep it track, in the college education program. And I am just excited to share with you all. We have some wonderful panelists today and kind of a list of questions, but please eat your lunch, engage as much as you can, put questions in the chat. If you have any, we'll try to answer as we go along. But enough from me. I am going to turn it over to our first panelist to just introduce yourself, your role, and we'll go from there. So I'll look at Melissa. You're the first on my screen.
Yeah, great. Good afternoon. Nice to see you. Nice to virtually meet you. I'm Melissa Beglinger. I'm a senior director at Target. So I've got service operations within our facilities management program. So think of our team managing our 1,900 stores and the actual facilities and assets that make them run. That's kind of what my team does. Just like the real quick 60-second career history, I started with Target out of college. I've done positions out in stores leadership. Probably most notably, I ran the highest volume store in the company, Edina, for a couple years and took them through a flagship remodel. For operational background, I was an operations leader in the field. So there were about 60 stores I supported. And the highlight of that position was that I got to stand up the first ship from store and pick up in store locations for the company from the field side. And then I've done several roles at headquarters, some supply chain testing, led our fulfillment network team through the pandemic growth surge, and then a strategy role around our stores as hub strategy for Target. So really nice to meet you all. Did I cover everything?
You did great. There's no
okay, cool.
Very informal. I'll turn over to Jen next.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Ironically, I'm going to say this right now. I met Melissa because of Bridget. So the networking questions you may come up with, they're very worthwhile. So just as a FYI, I haven't seen her in a year or two, but great to see you again, Melissa. And networking really adds up, and just writing down names really start to cross them again and again. So I'm Jen Nastosian. I live in Woodbury. I am actually, ironically, out of a job again because I am involved in corporate restructuring again. So my background, I actually graduated from Iowa State, started at 3M as an intern, worked at 3M for about 25 years in IT, supply chain, operations, Lean Six Sigma, integrated business planning, SAP deployments, and back in Lean Six Sigma operations. So I did just about anything on the ops side of the house you can come up with if you're looking under that type of broader umbrella. Was restructured out of a role there in 2022, which is actually when I met Melissa and Bridget, and then landed at Cargill in 2023. And Cargill, if you haven't heard in the news, just went through their own restructuring, and they didn't need the CI resources they thought they needed. So I am now back looking for a new position. But I've worked in, like I said, all those disciplines. I also, if you look at within 3M, I have done go-to-market strategies in industrial, electronics, consumer, and then you throw in the agricultural side from Cargill. So I've touched a lot of different business functions as well. And on the spare side, I do have 3 kids that run around, and one of them may be popping in here. She is a high school senior who had a moment this morning, so she may pop in, and I apologize in advance for that. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you, Jen. I will end with Eric.
Hello, everybody. Eric Mueller. I graduated with my part-time MBA just last year, so I'm a fairly new alumni, but very excited to be back and share my insights now that I've been about a year removed from that. But currently, I am in strategic sourcing at Andersen Windows. I'm a commodity leader for the aluminum space here at Andersen. My background is actually engineering. So I started as a chemical engineer, started at Andersen as an intern, and then transitioned as a materials engineer in research and development, and did that for 5 years. And then about that time, this was 2021, I had some interest because my engineering function supported the whole enterprise. I wanted to go back and learn more about business, understand how I could grow my career within Andersen. And that's when I went back for my MBA, as well as made the transition or the slight career pivot into sourcing at that time. So I've been in sourcing now coming up on 4 years. It's been a good journey, a lot of fun, continue to support the enterprise. I'm excited to hopefully highlight some of the learnings that I've had and share that with you. Thanks for having me.
Great, thank you. And just to get us warmed up, we're all going to share our favorite winter activity, not fake spring activity we had 2 weeks ago when it was 80 degrees, it felt like. But what is everyone's favorite winter activity? I'll pop it back to Melissa.
Yeah, so I have three kiddos. They're 10, 8, and 6, and they agree on very little in life. But one thing they can all agree on is that they will go ice skating. So that's probably my favorite winter activity because all five of us will actually participate and have a pretty good time. We're in Southwest Minneapolis, so a lot of the parks do where they like flood the field. So just a short walk, and we can all have some family fun.
It's great, thank you. I still can't get my 3 on skates, but I'm taking the energy. I appreciate that. How about you, Jen?
So I'm not sure how many people have been involved with the St. Paul Winter Carnival, but that is my favorite winter activity. I have friends who are Vulcans who, if you have seen them in parades, the guys all in red and screaming about fire. I have friends and family that have been involved with it for as long as I can remember. We used to go to the ice castles growing up when we came to visit grandma and grandpa, and now I drag my kids to the parades and to hang out with the Vulcans. And we've even ridden in the fire truck with the Vulcans in the parade. So that's our big family activity for the winter. It's only a little piece of time, but we try to make the most of it. And it just ended last weekend, so we had a little fun.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. How about you, Eric?
Yeah, it's morphed over the years. So I also have two young kiddos, 3 and 1, but so they're very young. And so I've had this newfound love for sledding. It's been many years since that, but being able to get on a sled with my 3-year-old and go as fast as we can, she's all up for that. So I'm excited for the snow on Saturday, to be honest with you, so that we can finally do a little bit of that. So.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Well, the next question, I'm just going to we'll kind of pick and choose, but if you'd be willing to kind of share maybe a recent challenge or project that you've worked on, maybe like the scope, what the typical day look like, skills used, challenge encountered, advice to us in the program, all the things. I don't know if we want, I won't pick on Melissa again. And we want to go first.
I don't mind kicking off again.
Okay.
That's okay with you, Jen and Eric. So a recent project I've worked on over the last year, I thought I'd share with you guys because I think it like shows perfectly this interesting tension between like operations, financials, with managing the customer experience and investing in the experience. So one of the things that rolls up through my team is Target's shopping carts. So you'd think that's a relatively like straightforward, like needs 4 wheels, make it red, should be a rather straightforward problem, but it turns out it's not. So what we have worked on the last year is kind of this question of like, does that shopping cart differentiate the customer experience? And if so, are we willing to pay more for a Target shopping cart that you can only find at Target versus like your industry cart? And so it's this interesting tension. So if I rewind back a year, my team manages the budget. So a key stakeholder in how we want to use that budget, because you want to have the right amount of parts for the guests. But of course, if we can better the experience, we would want to too within our budget. So rewind about a year, we set up a learning plan. So met with teams across the organization that were stakeholders across finance, the store teams to understand like how the carts push, our team to understand the maintenance and durability, enterprise insights to help us survey the guests and do some like guest intercepts to get feedback on the cart. And then marketing to understand like, is this intellectual property to target? Like, is there marketing branded in this operation world for this shopping cart? So we launched a year-long learning plan where we gathered insights across tests for the 2 different cart types. And recently arrived at a recommendation where we intend to lean into the more expensive differentiated cart because it does have value to Target. So just one of those times as an operations leader where things took a really interesting bend and you were kind of thinking outside of some of the core principles that I think we often focus on as operational leaders in terms of budgets, operations, durability, but to really consider the customer experience in that question too. If you'd like to see the cart, it's at the Edina Target. It's pretty nice.
I was just gonna say, I know exactly what Target it's at because I will go there. I'm like, these carts are so nice.
Like the Cadillac of
They're
carts.
Cadillac of carts. And I want you to know, if you're picking the carts with the kids, they can sit in behind. There's more space. Could you make
Yeah.
it 3-seater? That'd be great. Okay, no.
Okay, noted.
I'm just teasing. Thank you for sharing that. And I didn't know what carts you were talking about. How about Jen or Eric want to share?
Yeah, I can break the cycle and I can go next. So again, as I highlighted in my introduction, being in strategic sourcing for 4 years at a manufacturing company, I do a lot of interacting across the organization and with many different functions, and I've had to learn very quickly the pace of our plant as they dictate, you, you know, uh, they drive a lot of the revenue and the profit here at Anderson. So in my seed and sourcing, supplier development and just improvement efforts is important. When I came to sourcing, I thought a lot about it setting the strategic vision in the 5 years in the future, and that's true. But what I have found is the most important work I do is when some of those visions that are being executed are starting to fail. How do we step in and partner with our vendors? And, as a cohesive tissue between the vendors and our plants to come to resolutions. And so, as I said, I support the aluminum commodity. And so there's been a recent issue that had popped up with one of our vendors who was having some quality issues. And so I had to put on my processing uh, understanding hat, my process orientation skill set to be able to go in and understand the whole process of how aluminum is produced at the vendor, as well as how do we leverage that material in our own plants and understand where's the quality issue affecting us, and then go back and help root cause analysis at the supplier. Where is this propagating, and how do we correct it? And being able to be that liaison, leveraging relationship building techniques had been important. And again, I think at Anderson, I'm fairly unique in having the engineering background here in sourcing, but I think it has aided me well, specifically in such a industrial commodity that aluminum is. And so this is a constant battle, not just with one supplier, but with many. And then the tough analysis, and Melissa, you kind of brought up how you engage with finance. I do too, because when these quality issues cause financial impact to our business, then it becomes an opportunity to be agile with our future vision and our strategy, saying, are we partnering with the right suppliers? If so, how do we need to find different ones with different capabilities that maybe fit our need, where the quality issue maybe is a sign that the current one is not meeting that expectation. So I know that's somewhat of a vague example, but that's as detailed as I think I can and be. Not wanting to disclose too many names in the situation, but it definitely creates a lot of excitement, emotional conversations, but ultimately level setting and developing win-win scenarios for both companies has been very exciting.
Thank you, Eric. All right, Jen.
And I'm listening to Eric going, that is something that you, very good example, because building those networks and connectivity, actually something I had thought about was a class I took about how to get along with engineers when I was in college at Iowa State. So that was one of my classes, and it was an experimental class on interdisciplinary problem solving. I was the only person in the College of Business who signed up for it. And I must have really thought I was going to need to work with engineers in the future. So I think it's a great example, because interdisciplinary is so big, and it doesn't matter what function you start in, it's what function you're in today, but leveraging all that background, which kind of is one of the biggest challenges that I was facing at Cargill. So people will hear, you'll talk a lot about ERP deployments and SAP deployments, and a lot of the time they're considered IT projects and we're just along for the ride, right? And what we had talked about, I heard it also at 3M, but what we talked about a lot was, how do you get value out of it? How do you change the work? How do you change the way you work as a result of an ERP deployment? So asking the questions of, what processes are we doing and how do we want to do them differently? Not just, I'm going to do the same process the same way with new software. Oh, and can you make my screen look almost the same in the new software too? So what we started asking was, if you're doing an ERP deployment, why are you doing it? You shouldn't be doing it because it's an IT project. You should be doing it because it's going to change how you deliver your business, and you're going to deliver new value to your business by doing it. So instead of just doing a lift and shift or doing it the same way in a new system, what do you want to do different, and what value could you pull from doing it different? And then using that as one of your guiding principles for what you want to prioritize. So if you only have a finite budget, which most people do, what priority do you want? So maybe you're saying we want to implement Salesforce or an IBP module or some other module of SAP. but you don't get as much value from one versus the other. Pick the one that's going to give your organization the most value, but use the value that you think you're getting to say, we're not going to be able to do this yet, or maybe not ever, but this one's really going to bring us the biggest ROI. So starting to think in terms of ROI and not just I have to deploy new software. So that leans into skills around, okay, finance basically, yes, but what's your process understanding? What's your change management piece of it? Because everybody has a piece of that puzzle. You're implementing it across businesses and across functions. What's your piece of the puzzle? How are you doing it different? What's the ROI that goes with it? So it leans into a lot more soft skills, honestly, than it does into functional skills. ROI, yes, but if you're really saying, what do I want to change and how? There's a lot more conversation about the change side of it than even the software piece of it itself.
Thank you. That did make a lot of sense. I guess thinking about like, how you transitioned into, your current roles from leaving the MBA program, one of the questions I think we often ask is like, what classes that you took were really helpful? Would you encourage us, as current students to focus on or skill sets that you really developed in the program? Or like, oh, this is really helpful in my current role, or any advice maybe you could give around where we're at versus to get to where you're at.
Yeah, this is something I appreciated being asked because it caused me to reflect just leaving school, like a year ago. To be honest, what I feel that I've leveraged the most has actually been the core classes. So supply chain and operations management, both of the accounting classes, it allowed me to speak the language of business from this side of it, both internally at Anderson as well as with my vendors, understanding how my recommendations that may be affecting their profitability and being sensitive to that, that leads to better negotiations. So I guess the recommendation I say is don't sleep on those core classes. There's a reason they're probably core, and it's exciting to think about all the object or electives, and I think there's some great ones out there. But I think some of those core classes can be super impactful if you take it seriously.
Yeah. When I think back, so I finished my MBA, I think at the end of 2020 or beginning of 2021. And the classes that have really stuck with me, are some electives I took for marketing. And so I don't remember the class names, but the concepts. There was one in behavioral economics, like how you kind of nudge people along in the right direction. And then the other one in that same vein was a storytelling class. So we practiced telling stories and like kind of peer reviewed them. The book that you read for that course is Made to Stick. So the content for both those courses are things I regularly refer back to. You're using data to help people make decisions, but there's also always this emotional component, and how you present the information matters a ton. So just picked up a ton of good frameworks from those marketing electives and just how you interact or tell your story around the organization.
Thank you for sharing that. Actually taking storytelling in the second half of this. I'm so excited. It's become highly recommended by everyone I talk to. So how about you, Jen?
So I graduated, I won't even say how long ago. I'll just leave it at that. And but I will say a kind of a blend of what Eric and Melissa said. For me, as I'm thinking back, those core classes are your table stakes. You have to take them. You have to understand the basic concepts in all of them if you want to have that broad business terminology, ability to move between functions, that piece of it. But when you want to start to differentiate yourself or pull on, like I mentioned, some of those soft skills, that's where your electives come in. So I remember taking a class on negotiations. I think there was a change management class, but those different skills. So the things where you can get differentiation, storytelling, now that knowing that it's there, like, yes, those are things that you want to have be able to have a basic conversation in business. So every single one of your core classes matters. But then you want to find those other classes that maybe not everybody takes and that maybe you can practice skills that are not your strength and start to build on them so you have a diversified skill set when you're going back either to your companies that you're at already or into where you want to be next in the future. What skills are you going to lead into that are slightly different?
Like that. That's actually a great transition to my next question. As someone, I'm coming from a education counseling field and feel like, what do you do with an MBA? What are you gonna do? Like that's I'm working on it. But I guess my question for you all though is like, how did you break into or transition out from the MBA? Like how did it impact kind of your career path, or how did you maybe leverage your I'm calling it my past life, you know, like your former career to utilizing your MBA now.
I can share a little. I know a lot of people when you graduate with an MBA, consider like a career change or a company change, and I think that makes a ton of sense. I've really enjoyed Target's culture. It's such a large organization. You can kind of move around and feel like you work for different companies. So I took my MBA graduation as a chance to do two things. One, to look at where I wanted to diversify my career a little bit. And so when I looked back through my roles at that time, I'd been a kind of core to store operations. And so took that as an opportunity to say, like, I want to move further upstream in the decision-making process and be on a team that's building strategy where it starts with insights. And it made sense to people that I was graduating with an MBA and that I would take that as a chance to pivot and that I would be qualified to do that because the U of M MBA like is highly regarded. So took it as a chance to like diversify or like consider something different I could do, but still within the company I was working for. And then the second thing, and this is advice that came about via Bridget, Bridget's super fan, but focusing on like what I wanted to learn next, like less on what the actual job or position was as I graduated with my MBA, but like what are the themes or trends that you enjoyed the most in your class or that you still wanted to learn in your career? And so as I networked and looked for job opportunities, really focused on what I wanted to learn next. And I think that helped people understand, to your point, like why my career might lead me to this thing that doesn't seem related at all. Because if you focus on what you want to learn, jobs like that exist in many places. So that was the second thing as I graduated.
Yeah, and I'd echo many of those same points. For me, it's a sense of curiosity that's kind of guiding those next steps. Is where had certain classes or things piqued interest, and chasing that a little bit, and the hunger that kind of comes with completing an MBA, kind of the hustle you have to get through being a part-time MBA, working a full-time job. I enjoyed that, and so there's a little bit of this. Okay, where's my curiosity, and continue to let that drive guide me has been exciting, and so. And then the second piece I want to agree with you, Melissa, is the fact that I've been at Anderson my whole professional career, and they've been incredibly supportive and flexible through the journey. And I understand not everybody maybe has that experience, but understanding that it is an opportunity to move companies, but it's also an opportunity to accelerate a career if you're given that position. And I think going through the Carlson's MBA, you will be changed professionally in the skill set and the way you communicate and engage. And employers will see that, and they'll give you those opportunities. And it's fun to partner with one that wants that curiosity to blossom and let you chase it a little bit. So that's my perspective there.
So I will say what you guys are saying is true to when I received my MBA. I was at 3M. I did the move a lot internally within 3M through multiple positions. Melissa, your comment about changing careers and staying at the same company, 100% was true at 3M. Probably would have been true at any of the larger companies in the Twin Cities area if they're supporting you through your MBA program. And I used that opportunity to jump from IT to supply chain, even though my background was MIS and supply chain coming out of undergrad. It was a reason to say, okay, I really want to try this different. And I keep talking about it, but haven't done it yet. Now, was it the MBA or was it the networking internally? It was probably a combination, probably more so the networking internally. But for me, getting my MBA was a personal goal. And I didn't look at it as a career stepstone for me. It was more, it was something I had always wanted. And I wanted to do that before I had kids because I saw enough people try to do an MBA with kids and they were miserable. And so I'm sorry, I'm sure many of you are there trying to do this. Those of you listening either have kids or in the process of having kids, thinking about having kids. That was my reasoning, as I wanted this personal milestone for me. I wanted to go to the University of Minnesota. So for me, those were the reasons behind it. It wasn't necessarily looking at it as what can it get me internal to 3M or what can it even get me external to 3M. It was more a personal goal for me to actually achieve that. Now, I will say, fast forward to looking for a job external to 3M. It's how I met Bridget. It's how I got plugged into different people in the Carlson school again, because I kind of backed away from Carlson because there were a lot of people from 3M who were engaged with Carlson. And I found different ways to re-plug in as a non-3M employee, being able to say, oh, there's things that I can do, like speak to you all, like things like that, that I hadn't actually been involved in because there were so many 3M engagement points to Carlson at that point. So for me, it's been probably post 3M where I've been like, oh, I can do this. I can be engaged. And I've really learned a lot from the people at Carlson, probably more in the last 2 years than I did in the prior. We won't say how many years. You can all go look at my LinkedIn profile and figure that out.
Well, that's a great kind of, Jen, you're making my job so easy. A facilitator, you're talking about networking. That's my next question. I network for like a living and counseling. Like that's what we
Mhm.
do. But it's been very different mindset. Like I think for some of you who've done, maybe some of the group have done like global immersion. Like I had a wonderful experience in Australia last May, made some lifelong friends. Like again, didn't expect that this time of my life because I have those 3 little ones at home. But for you all, like, what networking would you recommend, or how would you like utilize being in this prestigious program and having these opportunities to work with wonderful people like Julie and Bridget? What would you kind of recommend for all of us who are in the mix of this?
I can start with that because I'm in the like buried in networking at the moment. But I will say, don't wait. That's probably the biggest lesson learned for me is I kind of put blinders on after I finished my MBA and after I finished my undergrad. And I networked, but it was all internal or mostly internal to 3M. I did meet a few people at conferences I went to, for example, on SAP or other things, but I really didn't focus on who else in the Twin Cities has the same professional desires, um, activities, thoughts that I do. So over the last 2 to 3 years, I went, okay, how do I expand that external view? And then I actually just talked to somebody this morning, and they said last year about this time there were about 10 different places they could plug into different evening or different networking functions, and now there's about 70 different places. So you can overwhelm yourself with networking too. So making sure you're understanding who you're networking with, why you're talking to them, and then if you're looking at groups, being selective about does this really fit where you want to be. So I think to Melissa's like, I can pivot. Yes. And if you're pivoting, making sure that you're finding places that you can plug into that are really the right pivot and not just a phone call because somebody told you that it makes sense. Understand the why behind it. So, I mean, I can tell you, I've talked to a lot of different people and this one individual, I didn't know why I was talking to him. A basketball parent introduced me. And I'm like, okay. And I found out he's considered a godfather of networking in the Twin Cities. After talking with him, he connected me with a bunch of people that I went, I don't know who these people are, but if he knows them and I found out he was a godfather from them. Um, he intentionally connected me with people. And he went through his network and said, okay, this person has a supply chain background. This person went to Iowa State and was really involved in the Alumni Association. This person. So, literally, as I've met people, it's like, he thought about this and I didn't know who he was sending me to. So, that's something now I'm intentionally, as I'm meeting people, going, can I help them find somebody, but with intention, with somebody who I've met in the past? So, think about it with the intention and think about it with that bigger picture of not just what's in it for you, but what can you do for the other person too. I think that's a big thing I've learned along the difference between in the last 3 years is it was networking to find a job. Now for me, it's networking to learn the other person's story and what their background is and how you can be mutually agreeable to each other. How can you mutually support and help each other? That was another long answer. I apologize, everybody. I'm kind of
Well
passionate about
done.
networking right now.
Great. I think that's wonderful. And I just realized, Will, you're in here too. Will's also a wonderful part of our Carlson staff. I sorry. I have my screen just so we're speaking. And he put something really great in the chat too about, conferences, associations, anything like events or, social media, anything that you've seen that would be really beneficial too, if you could add that also to your answer. Great question, Will, and welcome.
Yeah,
Yes, and yes, I can say that. Go ahead, Eric.
oh, yeah. So for me, leveraging the connections you make with your fellow classmates and even faculty have been important. And Jen hit it right on the head. It's never, networking is never a one-way street. It's always two ways. And so be very comfortable with continuing to offer support at the end of network connections, just so that they're fully aware of you offering your own network to that person. And I've seen a lot of fruit with that with my classmates is uh, wanting to get to know other people in the Twin Cities area or other connections. Being able to use LinkedIn to understand who are they connected to, but who are they a second connection to me, It's been very helpful to use that. And my classmates who have all kind of graduated at the same time frame have been very willing to offer that. And I'd say not just who you graduate with, but I've actually found the Carlson Alumni Network being very, very generous in how they've connected. And Bridget's obviously a great center point to being able to kind of point in the right direction. But even from that, it just kind of ends up snowballing. To be comfortable asking questions, asking to connect, but come prepared to with a purpose and some questions. Not an ask, but just like some meaningful questions is always, I think, well received.
Yeah, I love that, Eric. What I was thinking about as you asked the question was like less the specific networking, but like my biggest hurdle with networking, I think, was mentally getting over feeling like I was taking somebody else's time. So I think that's kind of threaded, Eric and Jen, through what you said, but people want to help you. Like network means net. It's like your group of people that's gonna help hold you up. And so I think mentally, once I got over that and was like, nobody ever says no to these. Like, why am I so hung up or feel like I'm wasting somebody's time? And I love when people ask me for help. It just kind of like opened my eyes or made me a lot more confident in reaching out and asking for help. Or there's an interesting speaker in your class, or even at work, somebody says something interesting, just messaging them on the side, like, hey, you said this. That was really interesting. Can I set up a get to know you? So I think that's helped me a ton. There's also a great book, again, recommended by Bridget, 20-Minute Networking. I think that book was maybe written in like 1980. It's very old. It's like a 30-minute read, but it gives you some of the confidence to go out and network in a framework you can use to set up conversations if you're new to it. And then maybe the second thing that didn't come up is like the art of staying in touch. Like it's great to network. Sometimes you're going to meet somebody and like that's it and that's cool. But even just like 6 months down the road, you see an article that reminds you of somebody or a podcast or like the just staying in touch, even if it's infrequent, really helps when you do need to make a call that you've kind of stayed in touch with a group of people.
So thank you all. Inspire me. Any like conferences or associations you would recommend as graduate student? I think that's something that's unique too. Like if you're switching fields, I know that we have like certain conferences I recommend our students to go to or associations to be part of in the counseling world. But anything in the business or management operations that you would say like, oh, this would be a great one, or entrepreneur conference?
So one thing that I've been starting to dabble in a little bit is just startup and small businesses. And so there's a lot of opportunities around the Twin Cities forums. It might even be like pitch series. You might have to pay $40 to get in, but the networking opportunities are always great. But again, it's kind of driven to the intent and the interest there. But the ones I've attended have been very well organized and worth my time.
Yeah, I think as I've changed roles every couple years, the group has changed, but my process is typically to look for what are some of the industry newsletters and associations. And as I change jobs, use that as a way to like gain some expertise in wherever I'm going. Some standouts, if there is anything related to design or strategic thinking, the Design Management Institute hosts some fantastic conferences, and it's like the design thinking model is what they focus on. So I've gotten a ton out of those. Other than that, like if there's a facilities management interest, I'm in some of those if anybody's interested in hearing about those, but that's a pretty niche part of operations.
I thought of one more: entrepreneurship through acquisition. Carlson just hosted one of those sessions. Bridget's like laughing at me because I didn't come up with that the first time I talked, but that was hosted. It was a great conference, and so I think the college will continue to have, at least from an alumni, I've found that they continue to have revolving series or opportunities to network. And at that conference, for example, there's a lot of people that weren't alumni that were not even associated with the college, and so it is an opportunity to come to familiar grounds where you're confident because you were there for many years, but be able to interact with new people. So that's been enjoyable too.
I agree with what Melissa and Eric are saying about finding those industry specific ones, or function specific, maybe is a good way to describe it. Over the last, I don't know, I've had a lot of different organizations thrown at me, and I'm looking at them going, is that one really going to help me? Like, what's the value I'm going to get out of it? So I'm really also looking at it as like somebody talked to me about a nonprofit networking session, but it's nonprofit networking, and that they bring in a lot of for-profit people and they talk about what they can do to enable nonprofits. So it's like you can meet these other leaders but you're also helping a nonprofit solve a problem at the same time through, and I'm like, oh, now that feels like something that I would be interested in doing versus uh, networking for the sake of having another conversation. So that's where I've been trying to be a slightly more selective as I've had different ones thrown at me is, so what's the purpose of this group? Can I see it being something I want to be engaged in when I'm working versus job seeking? And if the answer to that is yes, then I'm going to lean more close to that versus this is for just when I'm job seeking. And not that anybody wants to be in that scenario, but when I can see where I can have a little more longevity in a networking organization or in an organization, that's where I would say lean into that. I could give you the names of probably 30 that I've received in the last 3 or 4 years. So if you really want one for a specific function or organization, just message me and I can share those with you. But to me, I've actually been asking myself that question of, does this really make sense? Is this a good place to invest my time? Because as you all know, you have finite time. So where do you really want to put your time and energy?
Great, thank you. Really good advice. Well, it kind of did lead into the questions I've left, but the last kind of one of the two questions is like think about like trends, and then I know we're in a very changing world right now. Not to get political, a lot of things are happening nationwide. We'll say any trends or things that you're seeing, like type of work that you would say that you're kind of trending towards, or you'll see this coming year. We all say with our magic mirrors of trying to predict the future here.
I'd say if you're not like dabbling in Gen AI, you should be. Um, you can use Gemini on Google. There's a free version, super easy to use. If you already are working part-time at a company, there's a lot of like Microsoft Office has Copilot that you can use. Enterprises are standing up internal to target Gen AI systems. But I think that's where we're headed. And personally, I think you will find it help you be more efficient. You can run your LinkedIn profile through it. It can check an email for you. You can set a persona for yourself and have it write an email for you. So it can really help remove some of like the administrative work from your day to day and let you focus on the fun stuff. So I'd say if you're not playing around with Gen AI, highly recommend you get involved with that because I think all of us are going to be using it for the rest of our careers now.
This is kind of a hard one for me to think through. Being on the buying side in aluminum and with all of the tariffs and things, that's obviously been taking a lot of our energy here and understanding what does it look like longer term, and it obviously flows into the strategies that we need to adjust or recreate. And the other thing I'd share is right now we're hybrid, and there's no declaration by Anderson at all, but I do think that I'm anticipating more trends to be in person. So if you're planning on kind of heading out or switching jobs, I think maybe location of those jobs may be more impactful than knowing that you might have to live more close. Again, this is just speculation, but I've seen um, since 2020 kind of the trends and who leads and who's following. So that's an expectation I have personally. But yeah, I think that's probably about it.
I think you guys hit on the two things, well, three, but with the return to office conversation. But AI, if you're not looking at it, tariffs, they're going to impact us whether we like it or not. What that looks like, nobody really knows. There's no crystal ball that's going to tell us that. Um, the other thing that I've seen a lot of, and it's probably because of my background, is a lot of focus on operational excellence and lean thinking and process design. Um, and it might be where I'm focusing, but I have heard a lot of people as I've been networking even saying, no, there's an overall focus. Every company has a different name for it. They don't call it operational excellence. They don't call it lean. They call it some variation of it. Some do use a standard traditional name, but every company is thinking about it slightly differently, but all in that spirit of how do we do things better, faster, reducing waste in the process. So I've seen a lot of that happen. My last role at Cargill was how do you reduce waste from finance processes? It's possible and it's necessary, but people never ask that question because when you think of lean, you're usually thinking of how do I do it in an operational supply chain, warehousing, logistics side of the house. Flip it to the work you're doing today and whatever function you're in, how can you do it better? How can you remove waste from your process? How can you maybe get a little bit of those skills You don't need to be certified at it, but how can you learn some of those skills even while you're going through the program now or in conversations with other people?
Thank you all. AI, yes. Yes, definitely. We're talking about in education too. Brad had a great question in the chat. He says, looking forward, how do you see the value of your MBA experience evolving the further away you get from your time as a student and any pivots that you made shortly after graduating?
Oh wow. I can start with that. I'm the furthest out from that. I can say that. So I will say, like I mentioned, it's evolved because I've leaned into my supply chain more. I've leaned into strategy more. I've leaned into just having those three letters after my name. And sometimes that's just a gate key to get through the door because they're looking for somebody with an MBA. And then it may be all the other pieces of the puzzle about you that come into play as well. But there is more and more places saying, do you have an MBA? And if you have an MBA, what's it in or what concentrations do you have? Um, and I didn't really lean into the strategy side of my MBA until I was in a role, my last two roles at 3M, where I was looking at integrated business planning, which ties into strategy, and where I was looking at how do we change what the strategy of Lean Six Sigma is at 3M to continuous improvement, and what does that look like that's differently. So there's pieces are always going to be there. You might not use them right away. You might have to dust them off, and you might have to pivot what they include in them. But I will say I still go back and look at some of that. And honestly, you guys have mentioned it, the networking side of it. People who either have a Carlson MBA, you may not even know them, but they have Carlson MBA after their name. They're happy to talk to you. And people that I was in class with are willing to, still brainstorm and have conversations with me. So I think it's both. I will say two of my MBA classmates were some of my first phone calls after I lost my role at 3M, and I still am in touch with them. So there's still people you're going to talk to every single day.
Yeah. Brad, such a great question. I guess like I'm thinking about it two different ways, like the value of your MBA evolving. Like my husband and I joke that my MBA has paid for itself a couple times over now. Like your ability to negotiate at a car dealership is much different than it was prior to your MBA. You have a different confidence when you're advocating for yourself at work. You can get different promotions, different career opportunities. So like there is a literal value to your MBA that I think you continue to see even a couple years after graduating. And then I was thinking about like, well, what are the skills I think that have paid off the most? Kind of goes back to that, like, what are the courses you remember? But I think it's the things that you practice the most that you picked up in your classes. So for me, like that storytelling, the behavioral economics, like use those every day. And then I still have one of my books from one of the like Lean Six Sigma courses that we took that I'll pull off the shelf every now and again just to look for a framework when I feel stuck. So those are some of the skills. Yeah, and I think as you complete the program, like you're just so well-rounded as a business leader. Like you're going to be able to hear things at work and have the confidence to like know enough to ask and learn more and like be confident in your curiosity, and that's going to take you really far.
I don't know if I'm super well equipped to answer this question given the time out of the NBA, but I can let you know that the way that I'm approaching it is uh, beyond just having the NBA, leveraging where I'm at, getting through that gate, but then starting to stack wins or new experiences that were brought forward based on my curiosity. And I hope that at the end of the day, that foundational MBA becomes kind of that starting point. And then as that curiosity and I jump to different functions or different leadership positions, it'll continue to have its value. But it's really what it's enabled me to do along the journey is where I hope to see that value truly take hold.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to the rest of our guests here for questions that they may have for our panelists. I'm happy to ask Melissa more about those grocery carts at Target. Just joking. I like that the cup holders. I really appreciate the fancy cup holders. Thank you.
Yes, those are highly ranked via the guest research.
Yes. And before COVID, but they used to have free popcorn if you bring that back, because that was like, it was like fun for mom to walk around with pop and pop and popcorn. Everyone was happy. All right.
I have a question for the panel.
Yes.
So this is Emiliano Urbina. I'm in the executive MBA, so SEMBA, and I'm graduating in the spring. Um, I guess the question is more reflective, right? So if there's something that you wish you would have done before graduation or in your last semester, what would that be? And you can take your time. I know it's a hard question, but
Um, a little bit of this is like the circumstances at the time, but I wish I would have prioritized more of the on-campus networking and like opportunities with other students to get to know them. And I did do some of it. My MBA largely lined up with the pandemic. So like we
yeah.
moved online for a good portion of it. We had a little talk about kids. Like I had two kids and got pregnant with my third. So like just a lot of circumstances I felt
Yeah.
like had me not prioritizing that. And that's the one thing I look back and wish I would have done more of was taking advantage of what was offered on campus and what was offered as networking and connection moments with fellow students. I wish I would have prioritized that more highly.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And I'd say the same thing is just in person. I was fairly involved with just different extracurricular groups, whether it be SLC. So I don't know what's available necessarily for you through the executive program, but it was the networking. I think I did a fair amount of it, but if I look back and being away from it a year, that's probably what I missed the most is just the ability to learn and build friendships and connections.
So my program was 100% in person, nothing online. Um, and it's not maybe what I did in the last semester. I would say it's what I did since I graduated because I graduated, I will say now in 2003. So it's been 22 years.
Mhm.
Um, I was a young MBA student, and part of that being that it was just a goal for me, not necessarily other things, and I wanted to be done before we had kids. But as I look over the last time period, I said kind of withdrew from the Carlson campus, Carlson community, getting back to school. I wish I hadn't. Um, I wish I had somehow, like every once in a while, I would go to like the a Carlson First Tuesday or one of the Carlson Women in Business programs. I would do one or two of them, but it was very sporadic.
Mhm.
And it didn't help me build relationships with the other people in the classes that graduated post 2003. So if it were me, it would be realizing that it's broader than the classmates that I have today and that I can reach out now. I'm looking at there's a whole new group of people that I have now met today, or at least some faces I knew from the past, but realizing that you're part of this new community and finding the ways that once you move beyond the community after graduation, that you could still, like I mentioned, one or two key things that are the right things to keep you connected and help you stay with that network moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other good questions? Not time to be shy. We just talked about networking. Kidding.
I can throw out a tip that I've learned on
Yes.
networking and preparing for things. So something that I have a list of, and it's sitting right here. Uh, I don't know if it was Bridget that asked it to me, but Bridget helped me build the list. Is what is your list of superpowers? What are those things you bring to the table? So as you're preparing to have different conversations, like Melissa was mentioning, like I was able to pivot internal to Target. I wanted to do these things. What are the things that are different and unique about you that make you a different player on that team that make them want to bring you on that team? So your characteristics, you might be really strong at making connections and building people up, building rapport, having conversations. How does that help the team? Maybe example, I worked with a team of mostly engineers and statisticians. I was the outgoing one. I was the one who was able to bring those people together. And we aligned around a strategy. Now, previously, they hadn't done that. What can you make a list of 5 things that you're really good at so that when you're in those conversations, you can say, here's my list, and being able to condense it because you can talk for hours about it, but if you can always remember to bring 1 or 2 of those forward in a conversation, it helps you have the right conversation about why you are the person they want to talk to about this skill or potentially this job moving forward. And you can always throw in though, when you're getting ready to have a conversation, if you get nervous, you can do the Wonder Woman pose. That's what somebody else told me, the Superman Wonder Woman.
I love that. I do resume prep with some of my students, like the interview prep. We always talk about the Wonder Woman pose. If I feel like you need to put it together, like stand there, power pose, like awesome. Any other tips or questions? Okay, I know we're like lunch hour, like extra 5 minutes between your next meeting. I think I know, but Bridget has a couple of announcements. I'm going to turn it over to her. But before I do that, thank you so much to our panelists. It means so much that you were here and being part of our Carlson community, and to everyone else who joined. I know everyone's busy, but it's so nice that we can connect this way. So I appreciate you on this cold Thursday, being together.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you so much. It's so fun to see folks, you know, on this side of the thing, on this side of the world, right? And getting to see your work worlds and just getting that glimpse into really like, what do you do? What do you do in your work, right? Because I'm going to guess none of you as 8-year-olds were like, when I grow up, I want to be an operations and supply chain expert. That just wasn't quite there, not yet. But I did want to just echo a couple of things that we have some additional programs coming up. This series of kind of seeing what you can be is the best. We also have a couple of things that are open to our students and our alumni too. So at the end of the month, on the last Monday of the month, we're doing how to work with recruiters. So just like how do you talk with them, and how do you get them to remember you in the good way? We also have navigating layoffs. As Jen has mentioned, hey, it is always it's not a choreography or a skill that we always have, and we never need to search alone. So we're gonna Coach Nicole, who's our alumni coach, myself, are gonna be talking through kind of like 5 key things to keep you sane during that process. And then it's our 10th annual Careers and Cheers event, which is going to be happening on April 24th. Coach Kelly McClellan is on this call. She was she was the person who started this event back when she was 12. And so it's really nice that we're going to have it again. And so for those who haven't been to this event before, it's over at Surly Brewing upstairs in Scheid Hall. We have about 150, 175 folks come together to hear great talks from alumni, such as the folks on this panel, give 10 minutes of wisdom. And then we bookend it with plenty of socializing and social lubricants, including beverages and appetizers. So again, open to students and alumni. Watch for promotions on this. But again, thank you so much to Melissa, Jen, and Eric for sharing your time, talent, and energy, giving back to us in this way. And we hope to see you guys at Careers and Cheers. So thank you, everybody, and have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks. Bye.